People for now are calling it the Mandela effect. I have called it the mandala effect. A mandala is a complex pattern which you study, whose purpose is to bring you awareness and help you understand a greater comprehension of what's going on. So it really is a mandala effect, not a Mandela effect. Now people are saying this is the end of the world, everything's going to go wrong, we're all going to die, oh my God, woo-hoo, boo-hoo. Right? A lot of nonsense about this. And nobody seems to know why it's happening. Lots of people saying, well, it's because of CERN, and they've got the Flash running around and they're too fast, and that kind of nonsense. And a surprising number of people say it has to do with the flat Earth, which it doesn't. Your world isn't flat, not in 3 dimensions. All right? The reason is, and I am the only one who has this information, so I'm sharing it with you, the reason is my work. Yes? I have told you that when a change is made, it takes a certain amount of time to integrate into the world. So if I make the change on a certain date, you'll see a kind of normal distribution of the effects of that change, back from when it first started and the world began to change so that this was possible. And then once the change is made, weaving forward until it's integrated. And the time system is complete again. Yes? And I spoke over the last 5 years of a number of times you wouldn't believe. That I have gone back into the past and made changes. And I've described some of these changes. Like introducing a particular pretty girl to a particular King of England in order to bring down the dominance of the Roman Catholic Church and create the Protestant Reformation. Yes, I've described some of these specifically. I've talked about the dinosaurs and my interaction with them. I've talked about changing the shape of the human body and how it's put together and how it functions, because it's immensely inefficient, or it was. I've talked about going back and making these changes. I've complained about images like the Mona Lisa. Right? And talked about Rodin. If you look now, many of those things, the Mona Lisa, the hand touching from God to Adam in the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Rodin's The Thinker, and several others are significantly changed right now. And because this last year was the year of Revelation, that is the removal of the veil, people are beginning to notice the changes in their world. Right? So what you're seeing is just the results of my changes. Now, that might confuse you, but I taught you a year or so ago through an example. Here are these 5 boys singing a silly song. Here's what's wrong with the energy of this song. Can you see it? Watch it, study it. Now, I will go back in time and change this thing before they recorded this video. Right? Now watch this video again. And you saw, this thing we had just spoken of wasn't there anymore. Yes? Yes. And I said it was never there. I changed it before it was recorded, so the only thing they recorded is the one you're now seeing without this. The only reason that you are able to see the difference, because normally I go back and change something, you remember from the time I was born it was always this way. And the only reason you could see this particular change is because I put you in a kind of bubble and protected your memory so you could perceive it. And this was a preparation for this time. That experience, this time. Yes? What's happening is, now that the veil's being lifted, some people are noticing that the world has changed. But it's important to understand that most of these changes, like the Sistine Chapel, Rodin, the Mona Lisa, King Tut, the headdress of King Tut now has 2 little creatures on the front instead of 1. It used to just have a snake. Now it's got a snake and a bird. Snakes and birds don't hang out. But anyway, it has 2 side by side. It looks really weird. this change would have had to have been made before they made the mask and buried the guy. Right? So that when they dug it up, this is what they saw, and they remember this is what they've always seen. It's the only way it's been. You following me? So the outstanding question, the first outstanding question is, obviously, why are people noticing? If it's always been this way, why are they noticing? If there's suddenly a new island in the Pacific or Australia's moved, you'd think everyone in the world would be saying, this is insane. There's suddenly a new island north of Norway, which is part of Norway, and it's almost as big as Norway. And a lot of people don't remember Svalbard. Right? And this is the island that has the whales with unicorn horns. And a lot of the people who are having trouble because they're remembering different things don't remember the narwhal. They say, no, there's never been a whale with a unicorn horn. And others think there's always been, you're not paying attention. The place the majority of those narwhals live is around Svalbard. This island that nobody remembers being there. Well, that those who are paying attention don't remember, right? But if it's there, then it's always been there. And the narwhals have always been here. So again, the question, why is it that some of you remember the changes? And it's very, very simple. I found this last night. And I will attempt to make it simple for you. From the monkey mind, from the first mind, everything in this world is real, and that's all there is. There may be a hope for the afterlife, but all there is this world. By the time you get up to the third mind, you start to be able to reach out and remember all these pieces from other lifetimes and incorporate them, and you get the sense of who you've been across multiple lifetimes, not just who you are now. Right? So, you may not have access to this yet, but at some point when you have access to the third mind, what you can do is go back and look at the spelling of Chick-fil-A or the Target sign or one of these change things. And put all your energy in your first mind and look at it, and you will remember that it's always been this way. Put your energy up in the third mind, and you'll remember that it's changed. Okay? If I put all my focus here, I remember that Chewie didn't get a medal. If I put all my focus here in the third mind, I remember that big fella having to bend way down so she could get that blue ribbon over his head, because he got a medal too. In the first mind, you can't remember. In the third mind, it's easy to remember. Right? Now, you understand that. So, logically, those who are remembering this change are people who are remembering from the third mind, not the first mind. Next obvious question. Wait a minute, it takes years to clean up your guts and get your heart online. It takes years after that for the third mind to begin to be active. How can so many people, and some of them are total morons, how can they have access to the third mind? And there are two reasons. One is people like my list of potential sea level boys who are here to be something much bigger. But that's a very small list. That may be 50 to 200 people around the world. So for the most part, we can ignore them. Out of the millions or tens of millions who are remembering the different versions, 50 people is irrelevant. When I take those people out, what I find is basically 100% of the people who are perceiving these effects are walk-ins. The ones who are not perceiving these effects are not walk-ins. I told this to Roja, and of course she was being difficult, but she said, well, that person's not a walk-in. And I said, that you know of. Not that long ago, about a third of the population of the planet left. And a whole new group of people walked in and took over their lives. Some people have gone through this, and their husband has gone through this. Right? This is not uncommon. About a third of the population of the world right now are walk-ins. It's probably more, because there have been more since then, but somewhere between a third and a half. That's a lot of people. And if you're aware of being a walk-in, many people aren't, so they just integrate naturally. They're sick, they're confused, they have messed up memories, they struggle for 2 years until they finally integrate back into their gods. Those who are aware of the transition realize that they're kind of hanging around up here in the third mind, because that's, where they came in. But they have no access to their guts, which is why they're sick. They're not in their guts, so, they're not grounding and energy is not moving. Right? This is why walk-ins generally go through near-death experiences and then spend a couple years struggling. Those who are aware make an effort to bring their consciousness down and integrate the first mind. To get to that place, they live in the third mind and in the second mind, and they're just beginning to integrate the first. Right? That doesn't mean they're people who've made the first healthy and then the second, and so on. This may still be a wreck, because if it hadn't been a wreck, the last guy wouldn't have left. Probably. Right? So they still have to get down here and then repair the roots and then build the trunk and eventually the rest of the tree. But in that time after the walk-in, they live mostly in the third mind and then down into the second, until they finally settle in and accept that I'm not an outsider, this is my body, it feels weird, but this is me. Eventually they accept it. Right? So effectively, for practical purposes, 100% of the people who are, who are remembering the changes are walk-ins. And 100% of the people who are not. Well, that's not true. Almost 100% of the people who are not walk-ins. So we would predict that ultimately, when people start paying attention, about 2/3 of the people who remember the change, about 2/3 of the people will remember it's always been this way, and about 1/3 will remember the changes. The reason is that reaching out from the third mind, they're tapping into other lifetimes and other potentialities, and they keep track of all these complex higher mathematics and having access to the other information, where the monkey mind is too simple to do that. Right? Does it make sense? Now, there are 2 other pieces that matter. One of them is the land masses. We'll get to that. Because those are not me making changes in the past that are propagating. Not exactly. It's not like King Tut or the Sistine Chapel. The monkey mind encodes things with emotion. Right? So we've got the changed and the it's always been this way. It's changed, it's always been this way. We've got these 2 perspectives. Did Chewie get a medal or not? Did he ever say, beam me up, Scotty, or not? One is, it's always been this way, and the other is, it's changed. Right? And the walk-ins are the ones who have access to it's changed. So, if in your childhood, in the childhood of the body you wear, there was a strong emotional attachment to a thing. Right? To the it's always been this way. Then right now, you will not remember it's changed. Because that emotional encoding is so strong. Right? I was in love with Pikachu when I was a baby in the 90s. And I know what Pikachu looked like. Right? Then when you see Pikachu now, he looks just like I remember. Because you have this emotion encoded, which means you're reaching into the first mind and remembering from there. You're not remembering from the third mind. Right? If, however, if there's not emotion and there's not awareness, you never saw Pikachu, you don't know what he looked like. You never used OxyClean, right? Then there will be no awareness. You won't have this dissonant perception, right? So 1, you have an immensely strong attachment. Then you will remember it's always been this way. 2, you don't know about it, so who knows what it's been, who cares? 3, it's made a strong intellectual impression on you. Right? If you get pulled over for running a stop sign, you're going to remember that stop sign emotionally because, you were pissed off at the cop who did this to you or whatever. But if you're a person who installs stop signs, I'm sure there's somebody who does, or a road planner, something like that, intellectually you put that specific stop sign there, and so you're sure it's there. If you have an intellectual knowledge, you're much more likely to remember the change. Because this thing has made an impression on you. And so you have a much greater chance of knowing it. or if you've seen it many times, if you've done it a lot, then you'll have this memory of it being the way you've done. And when it changes, and people say it's always been this way, you'll say, no, I have much memory of this. Right? And so these two effects, the intellectual encoding and the emotional encoding, will balance off. If you encode it strongly enough emotionally, you'll remember it's always been this way. If you can encode it without emotion, but with a lot of perception, like a dish soap. Nobody's emotional about dish soap, but you see it a lot. Right? Then you're more likely to remember it's changed. And this reason right here, the emotional encoding versus the intellectual encoding, or perceptual awareness encoding, is the reason that a person may remember this mandala effect, but not that mandala effect. I saw someone say, I get all these mandala effects right, I know all these things, and this one, you're wrong because I don't remember it. Right? So you'll find that a person may remember these three, but not those two. Or remember these two and not those three. When that happens, it's because it got encoded with a lot of emotional impacts. Like the country you live in, for instance. Right? Or the color of Adolf's eyes. Right? If it was encoded with a lot of emotional impact rather than just something that caused a great awareness, then you will remember it's always been this way, because it pulls you into the first mind. So it's always first mind versus third mind, but strings with strong emotional connection pull you into the first mind. Things with a lot of awareness just make you more aware, and you approach it from the third mind. That make sense?
Yeah.
The only other thing is the changes in landmass, and I'm going to talk about that separately. But with this understanding, you can understand why this effect is happening, why some people remember and some don't, why it's inconsistent. All of this stuff fits into a nice, neat model with these simple ideas I've just given you. The walkings in emotional encoding.